I got big cojones. You got little cojones.
Mike Matusow talked a big game, and for a while, he backed it up. But the same mouth that built his legacy, it destroyed everything. This is the explosive downfall of a man who never learned to shut up. Mike Matusow was one of poker's best performers. Born and raised in Los Angeles, he got hooked on video poker at the age of 18. A few years later, he found real cards, real chips, and real blood in the water. By the late 90s, Mike was playing to dominate. In 1999, he won his first World Series of Poker bracelet. The prize was a cool $265,000, but what he really won was a spotlight, and Mike was ready for it. They called him the Mouth, and he earned that name every time he sat down. He talked before the hand, during the hand, and after the hand, especially if he won. But it wasn't aimless chatter. He used words the way others use chips, as weapons and tools of pressure. Where most players relied on silence, Mike built chaos. He could tilt a pro with a single sentence, make amateurs quiver in self-doubt, and when the cards hit the table, he had the skills to back up the noise. By the early 2000s, Matusow was feared, not just because of his game, but because of what he could do to your head. He'd get inside your mind, set up shop, and live there rent-free. Even Phil Hellmuth, the poker brat himself, once admitted that Mike was the one player he truly feared. Now that's a warning. But poker has a funny way of turning strengths into weaknesses. The louder Mike got, the more dangerous things became. Because when your whole strategy is built on fire, it only takes one spark to burn the house down. He'd run his mouth so hard that opponents stopped focusing on their cards. They were too busy trying not to snap. One-liners, digs, reverse psychology. Mike was a master of confusion. And when you're off balance, you make mistakes. Mike just made sure you made them in his direction. But like any weapon, his mouth came with recoil. He didn't just talk to tilt people, he talked himself into trouble. He'd reveal too much, bluff too often, or tilt himself into massive blowups. ESPN even coined the term a Matusow blowup, because it happened so often it needed its own phrase. He could be up big, playing the best poker of his life, then shove all his chips in with a hand that made no sense. Even he admitted it. He'd say it right after busting out, "I blew up." And everyone knew it was true. One famous incident came during the World Series of Poker in 2005. Mike went head-to-head with Sean Shaykhon in a hand that devolved into a screaming match. At one point, Shaykhon snapped, telling Mike to shut the F up after getting pushed too far.
You know, we're in a hand. You need to shut the up.
Uh-oh.
What did you say, Mike?
Mike.
What did you say, Mike?
The tension was so high it infected the entire table. Shaykhon played angry, Mike played erratic, and the whole dynamic imploded. Even when he pulled off brilliant bluffs, like the one where he re-raised all in with king-queen on the flop, chasing a straight draw, and convinced Casper Christensen to fold pocket tens. After the fold, Mike revealed the bluff, mocked him for the laydown, and rubbed it in. "Down the street's the kiddie game," he sneered. He didn't just want to win, he wanted you to feel it. But that desire for dominance came at a cost. The more he taunted, the more he was targeted. Players started gunning for him just to shut him up. And when that's your reputation, the fall is never far behind. By the early 2000s, Mike was battling himself. Behind the scenes, he was spiraling into drug abuse. And in a game where clarity is currency, Mike was running on fumes. He tried to keep it together, he tried to keep winning, but eventually, everything spilled out. In the year 2004, Mike was arrested for drug distribution. The details were ugly: stings, wiretaps, and a 6-month jail sentence that took him out of the game entirely. One of the loudest mouths in poker, silenced. When he came back, he didn't hide from it. In fact, he owned it. On air, he openly said, "I got out of jail 3 months ago. No filters, no excuses, just raw, painful honesty." But even after jail, the chaos didn't stop. In the years that followed, Mike became one of the biggest names in online poker, thanks to his sponsorship deal with Full Tilt and his relentless drive to win again. But just as his career started to stabilize, the Ultimate Bet scandal hit. Ultimate Bet, a site once seen as a pillar of the online poker boom, was caught in a massive cheating scandal. Super user accounts had been stealing from players for years, and Mike lost millions. It wasn't just money, it was confidence. Matusow said the scandal took away his ability to pull the trigger. He became hesitant, second-guessing the aggression that once made him unstoppable. The swagger was still there, but the damage was deep, and it stuck. The man who once thrived on chaos now couldn't trust the game itself. He started playing tighter, safer. He even admitted that from 2007 to 2008, people still feared lunatic Mike, But in reality, he'd become an NIT, and when that stopped working, he was lost again. The addiction, the jail time, the betrayal from a game he helped build. Mike wasn't just a controversial player anymore. He was a man fighting ghosts at every table. After years of wear, Mike underwent major back surgery. What followed wasn't just recovery, it was a total collapse. He found himself in chronic, relentless pain, the kind that doesn't just slow you down, it changes who you are. He described it as times 100 worse than the worst thing imaginable, and he wasn't exaggerating. For the first time, the mouth went quiet. But Mike being Mike, he didn't rest, he didn't heal. He jumped back into the highest stakes games he could find, desperate to win it all back. The pain, the pills, the past, it didn't matter. He needed to prove he was still that guy. And just like that, the cycle restarted. He racked up debts, big ones. At one point, he admitted owing over $783,000. Most of it was from trying to run it up too fast, chasing losses, and throwing himself into games he wasn't mentally or physically ready to play. He says now it was a mistake, that he was trying to pay people back, trying to fix everything in one big shot. But poker doesn't work like that, and the more he chased, the worse it got. He stopped going to places like the Bellagio over petty disputes. He pulled away from the community. Even his closest friends started wondering if he'd ever make it back. And then came the moment that changed everything. Not on the felt, but inside his head. Mike stopped playing the victim. He said it plainly. The day I quit playing the victim, everything changed. He got clean. He quit sports betting. He started treating poker like a job again, not a wild ride. He created a daily bankroll system, paid off most of his debt, and began rebuilding a life without chaos. But by then, the damage was already done. The legend of the mouth had become something else entirely. And for Mike, every comeback now felt more like survival than glory. Matusow says he's not the same person anymore. He doesn't jump into every high-stakes game just to prove a point. He doesn't blow his bankroll in a single session, and he doesn't run on adrenaline and ego the way he used to. Today, he says he just wants peace. No more chaos, no more drama, just a debt-free life and a couple million in cash to retire comfortably. That's his goal. That's the dream. And for a guy who once shouted down opponents for fun, that kind of quiet is almost jarring. But the truth is, not everyone's convinced, because even now, traces of the old Mike linger. He still talks loud, he still gets emotional, and in interviews, it's clear, he hasn't forgotten a single slight, a single betrayal, a single lost dollar. The pain sits just under the surface, always ready to bubble back up. He's open about his mistakes. He admits to making awful decisions after surgery, to letting pride override logic, to hurting people who trusted him. And in that honesty, there's growth, there's maturity. But there's also something else, regret. Because while Mike may still have a few years left at the tables, the version of him that once struck fear into the hearts of pros is long gone. What remains is a man who spent the better part of 2 decades fighting demons, some of them his own, some of them dealt by a game that gave him everything and took just as much away. The question now isn't whether he can still win, it's whether he'll ever stop losing pieces of himself trying. Mike is still in the game. He streams, he plays, he talks, but he talks differently now. He talks about balance, about peace, about not chasing the $10 million dream anymore. He wants stability, safety, sanity, but the fire's still in there, flickering behind his eyes, waiting for someone to misread a bluff or bring up the past. He still dreams big, still believes he can win, and maybe he can. But what makes his downfall so satisfying is that it wasn't caused by bad luck or rigged software or a brutal river card. It was caused by Mike. And that, more than anything else, is what makes his story impossible to forget. And while Mike was busy blowing up, someone else was quietly pulling off one of the most shocking performances in the World Series of poker history. He wasn't a pro. He wasn't backed by big money. He was a full-time nail technician who walked into the World Series and left the pros speechless. Click here to watch how one everyday player outsmarted the legends on poker's biggest stage.